Oh, now we're on YouTube. Look at that.
There you go. So it should set this up in a second. The YouTube integration is pretty solid.
That is cool.
All right. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to End Hype Live. So I'm doing this every Thursday right now, 5 p.m. I'm coming live. We're talking about a certain topic to help you grow your startup, start your business, explode and grow whatever you're trying to do, and then answer questions. And where I feel like there's somebody that is just smarter than me that can really fill us in on those tactical details, I'm bringing people in. So I'm going to give you the same call to action at the end. If there's something that is a challenge to your business, is an obstacle that's preventing you from just doing whatever you want, achieving your dream, fulfilling your life, whatever it is, like, becoming one with the universe, message me, right? Message me on Facebook or whatever platform, and I'll reach out to my network and we'll bring somebody on and we'll talk about that exact thing. And in that vein, I've got my buddy Roy Edwards today. So Roy and I are both part of a mentorship group. So if you guys listen to the show, on the podcast or YouTube, like how into finding a mentor that I am, and we're part of the same mentorship group.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the values that you get out of it is just meeting amazing other professional people, and then figuring out, and Roy knows this piece, and I actually needed this for one of my businesses, and it just fits so well. It's like the exact challenge that I had, and we had been talking because we're both in Northern Virginia.
Yep.
We're part of the same mentorship group, and you just start meeting and networking, and you find out like, hey, my buddy needs this, I need this, and it seems fortuitous, but it's really because we're acting on our problems. So today, Roy is going to fill us in on something that is way more exciting than it at first blush sounds, which is business systems and what you can do with cool IT, the latest tech stack that's out there. And but Roy, first, like, don't let me just brag you away, right? Tell me a little bit about like who the hell are you, and like I think something that's interesting for people that have a job right now is like, how do you go from like, as a kid, did you want to get into business processes and business process automation? That's you grew up doing that, right?
Yeah, as a 9-year-old kid, I was like,
Yeah.
in between my Digimon, making sure that he didn't die.
Yeah.
I just thought about business processes. No, I never wanted to be. Well, first off, let me say that it's not that I didn't want to be in tech, because, growing up, so I'm 34, and so I remember getting a computer in our house, and I was obsessed with the computer. It was an Apple, and I was always on it. And we had the dial-up internet where you had to sit down and make sure that your mom was on the phone. And, if you were on the computer and she picked up the phone and then you were in trouble, so, so I grew up around and in technology. I was about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old when we got our first computer, I want to say. And I was always on AIM. And there was this thing called Angel Fire back then where you could build a free website.
Oh yeah.
And, Angel Fire just spammed the hell out of whoever went on it.
Oh yeah.
But it was a free platform where you could just do whatever you wanted, right? And then MySpace came along. That was more along the lines of high school. And you could write HTML code. And I actually got accepted into an academy when I was in junior in high school, where I could take college courses in high school. And so I took graphic and web design in high school as a junior. And then I taught the same course as a TA my senior year. So I went into college with about 12 college credits, all in web and graphic design. But it wasn't really what I wanted to do. Like, even through all of that, it was kind of like web design was just kind of like a cool party trick. You know,
Sure.
it was just something else, you know, like my dad was very against me going to a graphics school. I wanted to go to graphics school and my dad was very against it. He was like, no, you're going to go to a 4-year college and you're going to go get a business degree, you know? So that's what I did. I went to West Virginia and majored in communication. I thought that I was going to be on the radio. I was a DJ in college, and you know, from when I was really little, even when I was developing all those websites, I was developing for this fake radio DJ personality that I had, or I was doing it for friends' bands. You know, like I have no musical talent other than turntables, and I couldn't play the guitar or anything like that. I own a guitar, I'm just not any good at it. And so I would go to my friends' bands. You know, I grew up growing up in the 90s. Pop punk is a big thing, right? So going to shows and stuff like that was cool. So I took pictures and built their websites. And so I had this obsession with music and put the technology behind it. But technology was never the goal. It was just how we, portrayed whatever it was that we wanted to talk about, you know?
Yeah.
So it was never really I never wanted to go into systems. It was just the more that I built and the more that I did, you realize that you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. You know, somebody would come to you and be like, hey, I need a website. Can you do this? And you're like, yeah. Oh man, it took me so long the first time. And then it starts to click where you're like, I bet I could do this quicker, you know? And that's where systems starting to come into play.
So would it be fair to say, well, one, technology is a facilitator, right? So it's kind of facilitating you getting into the thing that you wanted to do, but then you see that there's a lot of rote work in like boring repeat work in it. So you're like, I don't want to do boring stuff. I want to get back to the fun part, right?
Yeah.
I think that's how people feel about like accounting and bookkeeping, right? It's like, I want to get to where's the cool part of entrepreneurship? I'm like, nope, this is actually what it is. We're filling out forms. So like, that's what I think of like when we talk is like, there's just so much of that. And the bigger the business is, the more of that there is. It's like when there's startups on the call right now, I'm just really interested in them kind of grasping this concept right now, is that you're probably the biggest obstacle to your success, right?
Yeah,
and so systems scale because you can remove yourself from the equation, get somebody else to help you. But also, if you're like me, you just get bored really quickly, and I don't want to do it. You know, I don't want to do that. I want to make cool stuff. So
right. And so like that's kind of preached in the entrepreneurship world, right? Is that, and I've read countless amount of books that say, you know, don't work in the business, work on the business.
Yeah.
Right. And as correct as that is,
yeah,
I'm not going to say that's not correct, because you need to be working on the business as opposed to working in the business. And that's really what systems and processes are, is when you're saying working on the business, those are the processes.
sure.
Right. It's just, it gets harder when you work on the business. If you're not building out those processes to remove yourself from in the business, then all you're doing is removing income. You're just removing yourself as an employee or a billable hour, and you're removing yourself to go do other things. Whereas if you're not building that position up to be an actual position, removing yourself and from it and replacing with a title, right? There's something that we all do that's 80% of what we do on a daily basis. That is the role that you should be that you would be hiring to replace. And we don't think about that when we say, oh, well, I want to remove myself. I want to go shake hands and kiss babies. You know, like that is the idea that we have in our head, where it's like, I want to be working on the business, not in the business. You know, I want to be, you know, whatever. But really, it's working on the business means systems and processes, and having the ability to hand something off to somebody else and have it run flawlessly. You know, the old, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, would this still run?
Yeah.
You know, that's the ultimate test of a true system.
That's Tony Robbins' benchmark for whether you have a business or you have a job, is that if you can't like leave your business for a week or two and it run, then you don't have a business, because he's looking at it like it's a system, it's an engine. And like your job is to like keep augmenting it to make it better, but your job isn't to run it. Like he's like, you're just an operator. You're not an entrepreneur. And
Right.
the first time I heard him say that, I was like, and I agree with like 60% of stuff that Tony says, but like that part, that from working in a family business, that like struck home super hard, right? And I realized, yeah, that's what startups and small businesses don't realize. Without a good process, like you're saying, how are you going to hire somebody to help you? And you hear this from people all the time. They're like, yeah, I hired this person and they stink at this job, or they suck. And like, if you hire one person and they suck, that's probable. That could happen. If you hire like 20 people and they suck, there's a common denominator there.
Right.
And it's not those people.
It's not them. Right.
You suck.
It's you. And we all, that I think the hardest thing that I went through as an entrepreneur in terms of growth, because the hardest thing of an entrepreneur is just getting started and just eating crap for the first bit of it. Right.
Yeah.
But is that first hire? And you have this thought in your mind of how your business is supposed to run. And I have said this multiple times, is that I am the product, and it's like, but how do I remove myself from being the product? How do I change it from Roy as the product to the actions and the steps that I take on a daily basis is the product? Because it's really not me. It's what I do, my thought process. So you have to take your mind out of the equation, or out of your body, and put it into the equation. And you say, if you've ever built a PowerPoint presentation for a training, for instance. So a lot of what I do is helping businesses, we audit them, go through best practices, teach them how to utilize technology better and get more organized within their tech and cut costs. Right. And so in the beginning of that, and I've been doing it for quite some time now. And so in the beginning of that, it was winging it, is where I'd go into it and then I would say, okay, tell me what your problems are and let's talk, and then we'd have a conversation and then we'd leave it and they'd go, hey, Roy, high five. That was awesome. That was so great. And I'm like, great. I'm glad you got a lot out of it. I'm glad we were able to connect and let's go. And then the next one would go on and it would just be this conversation. Whereas and then it was time to scale and have multiple clients, and maybe they're going on at multiple times and I would need to bring somebody on, and I say, okay, I need you to go into the room and just react to what they're saying. But that never works, right?
Yeah.
It's never just say the right thing. So that's where it was like, okay. So at the very first step that you can take when you get into templating out or processes is templating and getting information on paper. It's what's the first step and what information do you need? And let's write it down and make a form out of it. Let's make a template out of it. Yep. Even PowerPoint presentations. Don't even leave PowerPoint presentations to chance. Change the background color to whatever it is that you need. Add your logos. Build out your master slide so that when you tell somebody, a new person, that you're like, make a PowerPoint slide. They're like, well, what should it look like? And you here, start with this. So that's the easiest template that you can make. And then creating forms is the next step. And then just getting out and creating step by step. Whatever it is that you do, there's a step and an action. And so oftentimes we say, step one of my business is somebody comes into the store. Let's say you run a brick and mortar. Somebody comes in the store and then Bill greets them. And then Bill walks over and hands it to Susan. And okay, but who's Bill? What is he, the greeter? Okay. So you didn't mean Bill, you meant the greeter. Right. And then, you didn't mean Susan, you meant the cashier or whatever it is. Right. And so you need to start replacing those names with positions. And that'll help you with hiring too. When you say, what's our greatest need? You say, okay, well, let's look at our processes and who touches things the most. And then that's how you can see at where your greatest need in terms of hire is, instead of just hiring to hire sometimes.
That's awesome.
Processes are huge in all aspects. And it doesn't have to be some crazy workflow that you're building out, right? Yep. It can be just a simple taking it at the step and what's the minute steps of whatever it is. Like, okay, so a new invoice comes in. How do you take it? Who touches it? And then where does it go to? And why does it go to it? What's that step? And then that's how you can build it out and then build on automation. As you hear my kids in the backyard.
Yeah. It's awesome. Somebody's having fun. So
yeah, somebody is.
Yeah, I mean that all it really hits home for me. In 2007, we had a large customer in aerospace that was like, hey, if you can't be ISO 9001, I don't know what it was, 2008 at that time or whatever the previous standard was, we're not going to do work for you anymore. And so at that time, I just started developing products, and I was in I'd finished business school, but like I hadn't jumped into the family business like that deep, and I certainly didn't know anything about ISO. So I bought some books and then just, I don't know, beat myself up over rocks until, I mean, we did it, we passed, we became registered, but then going through that process with everybody is like, okay, how does this work? And they're like, I've worked here for 15 years. I know how it works. I'm like, that's great. But this guy who's never been here before, he's going to come by and he wants to know that, and they're like, but why? I'm like, okay, let's make it super simple. Like, what do you do? And that like was my first trial by fire into process management.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, now that's like really what I draw on every day, and like all of that pushback and things that we've improved. That's the stuff that Red Blue Collective draws on when we talk about people growing people's businesses. But it's like not the cool thing that people give big stadium speeches over,
right?
But it's the thing that makes businesses big and successful, right? So
yeah, and ISO is a bear. I've been through that a bunch, but it's not the most sexy of topics as to say, but a bad business when it that a bad business when you walk in and you look at it, because people are off doing whatever they're doing, right? We've all been a part of that business where maybe you weren't an entrepreneur. I wasn't always an entrepreneur. I worked for somebody else, and it was very obvious when walking into a business to work for somebody that didn't have a process. You could tell that you could see their next growth. It wasn't really there. You could see that their next 5 years, and you could say, this growth, unless they get their act together quickly, because they're fumbling for papers, or well, you got to go down to this person, and then that person says, oh well, I don't know why they sent you here, and so okay, what do you need? And so it's one of those things that you don't know you need it until you don't have it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like there are very easy ways to start, and I always tell people to start by drawing. We have it in our minds as to say what the steps are within a process, and so just draw it out. Take a piece of paper, take a napkin. It doesn't have to be sexy, and just draw squares with arrows.
Yep.
I have it here, and then arrow, then to this person, right? And then take a look at it after you've drawn it on paper. I'm a very visual person, and so after I've drawn out my circles and my squares and triangles and whatever they mean to me, and I take a look back and I look at it, and then I can clearly see where something is wrong. I'll say, why does it go here? That makes no sense. But we've just been doing it that way. And that's just the way that we've always done it. I don't know why we did it that way, but when you draw it on a piece of paper and you can see it, then you can remove that step. And now all of a sudden things become a little bit quicker and a little bit faster and a little bit more streamlined, and you're saving hours and you're not doing that redundant work anymore. And then when you bring on new people and you hand them a workflow design, as you've fine tuned it and as you've turned it into, a true process, that next person, when they look at it, then they know where they fit in. And that's the biggest part of that I found in businesses. And as we've grown and as we've, growing means more information, means more documents, and you're having to save stuff for multiple years. And so if you don't get it organized in the beginning, then you're fighting an uphill battle. And then the next person that comes on and the next person you bring on, they're going to start organizing their documents. They're going to start organizing their information. They're going to start doing processes in their own way. And it makes it a lot harder to replace somebody who is just, they are the process.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
it's borderline impossible at that point. So you need to get it as soon as possible in your entrepreneurship journey to start drawing out processes. And it doesn't have to be some crazy thing with headers and all over it. Take a napkin, take a piece of paper while you're listening to this. Start drawing squares, and whatever stage one is, whatever starts it off, what moves that start, and then what is the end. Those are the main things that you need, and then start drawing squares of how it gets to the next. You can start getting really complicated with swim lanes and all that other stuff, but don't worry about that until you understand where it starts and where it goes and how it gets from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4.
So it'd probably be fair to say there's a lot of this that anybody on this call could do themselves. And then when they hit like a reasonable understanding with their team, or they've used it a couple times, they've improved it, they all have a consensus, like that's when they would be looking at somebody like, okay, now I call Capital Presence, now I call Roy, and I say like, hey, okay, Roy, this is what we have, and it's working for us. Like,
yeah.
But we want to 10x our business. So like, how can we improve these processes? How can we automate these processes? But at least they have something down, right?
Yes. And don't go crazy.
Don't go crazy.
Don't go crazy. That's the number one thing. And even in my company, this is what we do. We automate people and we build these powerful applications to save you time and save you money. And then even so, I have to go to my developers and say, this is too much for this stage. There's in software development, and I'm starting to implement this more into daily lives, but there's something called an MVP. Mm-hmm. And that term means a minimal viable product. So it is in this world of releases, what is the mission critical that solves the immediate need? What is that you can implement today or in the next 2 weeks?
Yep.
And then build off that.
Yep.
So many times people are like, oh, well, I want to build this crazy database and I want to be able to pull information out of it. And I want to automate it. And you say, okay, that's great. Make an Excel sheet first.
Step one, buy a computer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the same thing goes with processes. If you want to build a bot that does all these crazy things, that's great. But start with the MVP. What's the minimal viable product? What is the lowest common denominator of whatever it is that you can get done today, and take action with it? It could be an Excel sheet. It could be a Word document, whatever it is. Very minimal is the key word there.
That's awesome advice. There's a lot of startups that watch this. So I can already hear the pushback right now where they say like, I'm a startup. I'm like, pre-revenue, or we're just starting. We don't really have business processes. And that's where I have to silence that kind of talk right now, because if you, like Roy said in the beginning, you're giving your pitch presentations, dude, that's a script, that's a process, right? But you can go a little bit farther than that. And how do you record the feedback that you get? How do you talk to the team and improve the pitch? So each time that you give it, it's like a little bit better. But if you're reaching out to investors, and there's a series of meetings that you'll have, but like if you're talking to customers initially and you have your customer discovery, right? You have a process. If you're unsure what that looks like, try it 1 or 2 times and then just write down what you did and be like, well, these are the things that worked, and then do it the same way. And that way you can create a process that you can be improving. But like we have a pretty robust discovery process. So I run people through some questions, figure out if they're a good fit for what I do. And then I like checklists and stuff. So I'm more of like developing, hey, let me send you, like people want to develop a product. I'm like, let me send you a product's requirement document. So if you don't have this is a great thing to fill out. And the questions that you can't fill out, I know those are the things that I need to coach you on, right? But you basically to get this product or idea to market, all of these questions and a lot more are going to be filled out. So like, let me just figure out where you are. And So my process is to, we have a conversation. I send them a piece of value. If we're not a good fit, they still have that cool checklist, but it works for me. It's not perfect, but at least I have like, a routine way of dealing with customers. And for these startups, it's very tempting to say, I'm not at that stage. I'll work on my processes when we have a business. I'm like, this is a good habit.
And I would say that everybody has a process. You just haven't documented it yet.
Yeah.
And so the processes that you're doing right now could be your meetings, right? How do you hold a meeting? When I first started my business, the first thing that I did, I wrote 14 SOPs or work instructions on how to conduct a meeting, how to write a report, how our project management philosophy was going to flow, how to communicate with clients. And so I started writing these out, and these were things that we were already doing, but we wrote these processes out, and that's where our culture was born from.
Oh,
because
cool.
if we say every morning we hold our stand-up meeting, which we do, we hold our stand-up meeting every morning. We call it Bricks. And so of that meeting, it's evolved into what is your 5 mission critical tasks that you're doing today? That's what our Bricks meetings are, right? And so we wrote a process around that. And so the process is keep the meeting simple. This person leads it. Here's the questions that they have to ask each individual member, and it keeps things short and sweet because nobody likes sitting in a meeting, right? And so if you have a process, and it doesn't have to be this crazy process. It's just how you do things, the appropriate way to do things. And we all have these things already out. It's already spoken word. So if you put it in writing, that gives you that time to see what you're actually doing and refining it and make it better.
That's awesome. So once we have these, like, what's I don't know. Let's start talking tech. I think people are going to find this really interesting because everybody uses like Microsoft Word. Everybody uses Excel, and maybe people have like heard of Zapier or If This Then That, but I feel like not a lot of people know that you can do a lot of the Zapier stuff like on a business level, like that you can, it's not just for like tweeting from your Arduino project that you flushed a toilet. Like you can do awesome stuff in your business, and you can automate a lot of those processes because growing sounds fun, but in reality, it's a lot of like in the trenches, hand-to-hand combat with people and like figuring stuff out. And then once you get it all hooked up, it's nice. Like the allure of automating that, is really appealing to me. So
yeah, so that's what we do for every business that we deal with. Is the first stage is an audit to see what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it and why. What technology are you using? And so, right. So we're in Zoom right now, right? So maybe we're using Zoom for our calls, but for our internal communication, maybe we're using like WhatsApp, and then maybe we're using, Skype for something else. And then, and sooner or later, I always liken it to cutting the cord, right? We all have, not all of us, but most of us, we've decided there are no more TV, right? I'm not going to pay that $200 cable bill anymore. I'm cutting the cord, right? And so we cut the cord. And then one of the first things I did after cutting the cord was I bought a TV streaming subscription. Right? And so I said, okay, great. Oh, but now there's all these other streaming platforms. We have Netflix, and we have Disney Plus, and we have Hulu, and we have ESPN Plus, and now I have Peacock. And sooner or later, you're paying more money than you were just by having TV, which is the whole reason to get out of TV.
There's just one service where they all were together.
Right. And so now you're defeating the purpose, though. You're paying more, and now all your stuff's everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what we do with businesses with tech is okay. So if your idea was to get out of managing your own infrastructure, right? You wanted to buy these SaaS applications, software as a service. You wanted to buy these applications to make your business better. But now you've gone out and you've bought like 10 or 12 applications that are all standalone that don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
So how do we get around that? And so our suggestion to that is through the Microsoft 365 platform. And so there are a ton of applications in 365 that do a lot of what you're talking about. They streamline applications. You can write automation around it, but it doesn't have to be Microsoft 365. If you're out there right now and you're like, well, I'm a Google guy. Well, Google has their suite as well. And then that's when those other applications come in, like Zapier, like you're talking about, or IFT. If you guys have ever heard of IFT, it's if this, then that. And so often we think of if this, then that, then we say like, if I walk into my house, or if I get close to my house and I want my thermometer to, or not thermometer, but the temperature in your house to go up, or I want my lights to turn on, right? So we can do that within your business. And you say, if somebody sends us an email to a specific inbox, then we want a chat notification to go out, and maybe a service ticket is created, and so that we can track these things. Sorry, I got some doors slamming in the background.
It's all good.
And so we want to be able to track these things, and you want to ease your life, and you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing, you're keeping up with it, because email is a necessity, but it's very much an evil. Because how many times have we been emailed, somebody asks us something, and it gets buried because maybe we have all these other subscriptions and we have all these things, and sooner or later we have 12 emails that have come in since that really important one, and we weren't able to circle back, and maybe we finally do a couple of days later, but it was time sensitive. And so you can automate certain things around that to say, look, when this email comes in from a specific user or comes into a certain area, then we can automate those things to keep them at the top of our to-do list, to create tasks and tickets around it. Or if I fill out a form, I'm filling out this form, then I can take other action out of it. Maybe the data flows to other areas. And that's when processes and scalability really comes in handy, because those processes and those squares that we drew on our napkins in step one come to life. And so now those arrows are no longer Bill at the front of the store saying, hey, how are you doing today? Go see Susan. Now it is an automation of that comes through. That step and that arrow no longer exists. And that is where the real flow and the real time saving and the cost saving really comes into a business.
Yeah, that's awesome. The kind of the thought exercise that I have people go through, because when you start your business and you're an entrepreneur, you're doing everything. You're doing everything yourself. And I think that is critical, not just important, because you can feel the pain of everything. So for us physical product people, like, you're doing the fulfillment and printing the labels and arranging shipping, and you realize, man, this would be great if I could get a tool that will do this a little bit faster or a little bit better, or use a fulfillment company, or use an outside bookkeeper, or anything that you do, you value it. You value any level of outsourcing or automation that you can do. But the thought exercise that I have people go through is like, imagine, is like Mark Zuckerberg is like at his desk, and he's like, well, I got to write these checks to pay these bills. And he's like, oh, I better start now. And is he paying every bill, or like getting every vendor? Like, no, but that's how people run their small businesses. And it like blows my mind. Like, I have to sign every check. I have to see every bill. And I'm like, you realize like you're ruining your business, right?
Right.
Like,
and you're not scalable.
Yeah, you're not scalable.
You're not. And so that gets back to how we started this conversation with working in your business versus working on your business. If you are working in your business and you're billable and you're making money and you're taking yourself out of that billable to go over and write checks and read, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Your business isn't growing, and you just took revenue out of your business by removing yourself from being billable on a contract.
Yeah.
So
that's like, right. It's the funniest thing, because I work with somebody who's like a scientist, and they're normally billable at $300+ an hour, and then they're struggling to do paperwork. I'm like, you could hire a bookkeeper for like $15 to $20 an hour, or like $500 a month. Like, you literally an hour or two of your time, which this person's going to do what you're doing in an hour in like 5 minutes, because it's what they do. But an hour or two of your time will pay for them to work and do all of this the whole month.
Yes. Delegate down. I'm not an expert at everything, and I don't pretend to be. And so marketing is something that I struggle with. I've read, I can't tell you how many books that I've read. I've read Gary Vee. I've read, just every marketing book you could possibly think of that is the highly recommended, but for whatever it's just not my thing. Right.
Sure.
And so I outsource it, and that saves me time, which I need to be able to do the things that I'm actually good at. And I'm getting a better service out of it. That time for money exchange that I say, okay, hey, marketing agency, do this. And for what might have taken me 4 hours to create a video that wasn't very good, now it takes them 30 minutes and it's great, And so you're trading those out. And that's the same thing with processes and systems. Instead of giving somebody something, a task to do with no direction, and giving and saying, here, do it the way that I would do it if I was you. Ready, go. And you're not giving them any direction. You're setting them up for failure.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when it gets circles all the way back to everything we've mentioned so far to say, the hire that we made wasn't good. Well, they had no direction. We weren't able to scale. Well, employees had no direction. So you spent most of your time trying to teach them how to do something, which took away from your business growth.
No one can do it as good as me. So,
Right.
You're like, yeah, but you're stuck at, 600,000 or 6 million a year, or whatever you're stuck at. And you can't grow because no one does it as good as you, or.
Nobody can do it as good as you if you don't teach them what you know.
Yeah.
And nobody can do it as good as you if you don't actually understand how it's done.
Right.
Because there's winging it, which is fine, but that's limited growth. You can't scale winging it. But if you break whatever it is that you're doing down into actual steps, and you teach those steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what you do. This is how you get there. This is what you do next. And then you still allow some areas in there that are, you obviously we're not training robots here, right? So you still need somebody to be able to have that customized field to answer questions, know what they're talking about, but you're hitting the major milestones and the major checkpoints along your roadmap to success. That's all it is.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And you build a roadmap out. I mean, we have a roadmap for our adoption process, right? And so you say, step 1, and a roadmap is, so this is something that I learned along the way, where you have your strategy and you have your tactics. A roadmap is your strategy. It's if you're building a pirate, if you bring you have your pirate map out, right, and going to find your treasure, right? The strategy would be, you have to, you start here, treasure's the X over here, and you draw the lines, and they have milestones. You take a left at the big rock, take a right at the palm tree, and you walk on towards daylight or whatever.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That's your strategy. It's not necessarily your tactics. Your tactics are what you have to do along the way, right? You can give somebody a pirate map, a very detailed pirate map, and they will still have to whatever, jump or run or get there using their own abilities. But at least you've provided them with a map of where it is that they need to go. So tactics and strategy are very, very different things. And we are building strategy. We're not building tactics here. We're building strategy when it comes into processes. And you say, this is how you do it, right? Not the ins and outs and the nit and gritty that you're going to have to do, because, that's different. But you need to set somebody up with the strategy of how to get from point A to point B along your roadmap.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like here in manufacturing, so we have processes, but we make between 1,500 and 2,000 unique parts a year. So obviously you don't have like a SOP to make every single part, but you have a routing that says, like, here are the processes that are going to be involved, the actual manufacturing processes, but like the SOP for that process sits over here, and it's generic enough that's like, this is how you set it up. This is when you get this inspected. This is, here are some key attributes. This is when the tool is being maintained. So it's generic enough that we really rely on the skill of people, so they still have they have a high degree of latitude, but also they feel independent and can
Yeah.
exhibit mastery, right? So I think that was like an initial pushback that we had in 2007 and 2008 about ISO and other business process management standards, was that it was going to become the new boss, right? And it's like, oh, ISO is going to tell us what to do. And it's like, no, ISO just says like, hey, when stuff comes in the door, make sure it's what we ordered it. And like, here's the checklist to make sure that it is what we ordered. But it doesn't tell you like over the 30,000 different things that we order a year, like how to do your job. Like you're still
Right.
the same person, like you know how to do it.
And you
Right?
can measure growth, and then you can start to see who's actually good at their job when there's
Mhm.
processes in place. So
That's true too.
if we were thinking about a cake, if we wrote out detailed instructions on how to bake a cake, I believe baking instructions are called ingredients and recipes, right? So if we wrote out a recipe, I had to think about it for a second. So if we wrote out a recipe for for baking a cake, and we handed that recipe to 4 different people,
Mhm.
right? Let's say that 3 of them followed the recipe and 1 of them didn't. We would very quickly be able to find out who didn't follow the recipe. So that person is clearly not doing what they're supposed to be doing, right?
Mhm.
That's fine. That we were easily able to identify that. Now the other 3 that did follow the recipe, their cakes are going to probably taste a little different or look a little different. And then we're going to be able to see who's excelling at their job, at what it is that they were trying to accomplish. We could be able to say, okay, this person's the better baker than this person. This person is better than this person. And you can evaluate your talent very quickly when you're processing out who understands these processes, who has mastered them, and who's just winging it, who's not paying attention. Because when you start building stuff out, you'll be able to tell very quickly who's winging it.
That really reminded me of E-Myth, which for everybody that's watching, if you haven't read E-Myth Revisited, it's one of the more like allegory style business books. I feel like it's top 10 business book of all time, but it goes through the journey of somebody as the technician. So Roy, I work with entrepreneurs that are like engineers that are thinking about leaving their job, or they're getting into the business world. Some flavor of technical person. So this really like maps out, is like we're a technician, we're highly skilled at our thing, and in the book, the person's a baker, so she has a bake shop, and she's like, I make the best pies, but no one else can make the pies like me. And he's like, well, you don't even have recipes written down. She's like, well, I know how to do it. Like, well, how are you going to hire other people and train them how to do it? She's like, I show them how to do it. And, well, proof is in the results. Like, success leaves clues. Are you being successful with the strategy? No. So we go through a personal evolution of that technician. We realize as soon as we start a business that's around our technical specialty, we're no longer a technician. We have become, hopefully, we're becoming an entrepreneur, but right now we're a potential entrepreneur is what I'd say. Mm-hmm. So we're no longer that. We're changing our identity, and that's like really difficult from a personal like development standpoint. But we go through this process, and E-Myth does a great job of explaining this. So first, we're kind of like a manager, right?
Yeah.
We're just like establish a process, make sure people follow it, and once we can automate, I think the most basic and normal form of business automation is delegating. It's like hiring people and delegating things. What's the framework? DEAL, right? Delegate, eliminate, automate, leave, or lead if you want to be more positive about it. But we make that progress from technician to manager to entrepreneur, where we can, quote, work on the business, or at least work on growing the business, or coming up with new pie recipes, or opening up a second shop, or something that only Roy can do. And I don't know, I really like that book, and I think it's simple enough that you could be in elementary school and read it and it makes sense. And you could be like PhD in management science from Harvard, and you'd read it and be like, the third time I read this, I just picked up something new.
Yeah. I would take it one step further and say, but even before manager, you have to be employee or in it. And it doesn't mean you have to go work for somebody else. I'm not saying that, But your processes and whatever it is that you're doing, act them out. Like I said, one of the first processes I made was how to conduct a meeting. And I rewrote it 3 or 4 times because I would open up the process when we would have our meeting, and I would go through it and I would say, this doesn't play out the way that I thought that it was going to play out. And that's okay. Right. And so, but you have to put it in action, because if you're just going to write a process and hand it off to your employees and then not listen to when they come back to me and they're like, this doesn't work. And you say, follow the process. That's the process. I wrote it, do it, but if you do the processes while you're writing them, act them out. And that's where MVPs come in. You say, okay, this is where I want to get to. And it's an ever evolving, ever changing process. Your processes are never done. that you shouldn't really have these processes where you write them and you tuck them away and they gather dust. And then that's just the way we've always done it. That's where you get in trouble. So you should be constantly reevaluating. SOPs change for a reason. Processes change for a reason. That's where innovation comes in. As new technology comes out, there are new ways to do things. And you should be constantly evaluating your processes and listen to your employees or whoever's doing the process. If you're a one-man shop, you write down what you're doing while you're doing it, so that when you do hire somebody, you hand it off to them and then listen to what they have to say when they come back and they say, this doesn't make any sense, or why did you do it this way? And maybe there is rhyme or reason behind it, but you need to explain your train of thought process, because it might be something that only makes sense to you. And then how are you going to grow?
That's awesome.
So definitely listen. And I would be an employee before a manager and then go down the line. But so often we try to write things or tell people what to do without understanding what it is that we're asking.
I just posted this on the YouTube channel. Context, right? So everybody says content is king. It's like the process is king. And I'm like, context is like the God emperor then, So, if you know context, you have power. I want to take it to the audience. If anybody has any questions, feel free to post something in Q&A, post it in the chat. Because we're here to add value and ask, answer whatever questions that you have. I mean, otherwise I'm just going to start riddling Roy with obscure questions about Microsoft Flow and when Planner is going to get recurrent tasks and things like that I want.
That's a good question.
Never, according to the roadmap.
Yeah. That's an interesting update. They are, though, implementing it with Microsoft Project. I don't know if you saw that.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Microsoft Project tasks are becoming Planner tasks. So you're more implementation, more integration through your apps. So
see, that's a dangerous conversation that we can get into right now, is like the project versus Jira. I mean, so I have a project management cert, and but from forever ago, and at the time there really only was Microsoft Project.
Yeah.
I actually wrote ERP software 20 years ago, and that was like one of the first misalignments of my love of tech, or crushing my desire to be in tech, I guess. But yeah, I had a project management cert as a result of that work, and we used Microsoft Project, and even then it was really complicated. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I'm actually training a course right now on Microsoft Project to a federal agency. And what I always tell people is break it down. Break it down to the smallest point and that smallest task. And while it might seem like a pain in your butt to start, same with processes, right? Break it down to the smallest point. And while it might seem like a pain in the butt to start and to get everything started, as you go on, you're trying to build a template. That's the whole reason. So the next time you do it, it's easier. And so if you're building on a Microsoft project and you're not being detailed and you're just, keeping it high level, then the real power behind Microsoft Project is reports. And you can see your cost. How much does this cost? How many resources did it take? Where were there slippage in our tasks and our milestones? So then the next time you can go back and you'd say, this cost us $4,200 last time and 3 resources. who was what was our highest resource cost? Oh, okay. So maybe we bring in a resource that is more senior, and then we can eliminate one of the resources and he can do both or whatever. But the thought process behind processes and project management for me, when you get in a Microsoft project, is the next time. It's always the next time.
Yep.
You're not writing a process or a project for now. You're writing it for the next time, so that the next time you do it, it's better, it's faster, it's quicker, it's cheaper.
Nice. Yep. Jade asks, what if you haven't finalized your business yet? Still looking for repeatable revenue. Do you suggest implementing a process then or waiting? That's a great question, because if we're in startups, we're more in like a project mode versus a product mode, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
My thought is identify your product as soon as possible. So with repeatable revenue, you want to make sure that you're repeating what it is that you're great at. So I heard an example one that was really good where it was you're a landscaper, for instance, right? And your whole job is mowing lawns and raking leaves. And so maybe somebody comes to you and they say, hey, I have these leaves on my roof and can you clean my gutters out? You're already here. Can you do it? And you say, oh, okay, sure. Because you want the money, right? So then you have to go out and you have to buy a ladder. Now you have to buy a bunch of sponges. Now you have to buy a bunch of stuff to clean out the gutters, and you got to power. And now they're like, well, you power wash. Okay. And so now you're spending more money to do these other jobs that it's not really what it is that you do than it would be. But sometimes you have to do that to get started. I've been there, believe me. But you want to focus on what you're great at. So for me, in the beginning, I'm in tech. In the beginning, people would come to me and they'd say, you're in technology. I need a website. I'm like, all right, well, I mean, I can, but that's not really what I'm great at. And so my processes were not around building a website. My processes were around what I was great at and writing those around what I was actually great at, so that I was building that part of the business up so I could do less of that. So that when that repeatable revenue comes in on what I'm truly great at, then I'm ready for it and my processes are ready. I wrote processes on my SOPs. I wrote them prior to having an LLC. So while we were writing the paperwork and getting started, and while we're writing out our products and while we're writing out who we are, I'm writing out my processes, because again, these are going to change. But I want to make sure that I am getting in and I'm building up where I want to be, how I want my company to be run, the type of people that I want to hire in, because the processes will dictate who you hire. They'll dictate how your culture and how your business is run. Whereas if you don't have any processes and you're waiting for that repeatable revenue to come, when that repeatable revenue does come, then it's too late, because maybe the people that you have, they already have their habits, and now you're trying to break people's habits to redefine how things are done, or you're writing your processes around people who are already there. And then if they leave, then you might have to rewrite your processes. So I would say start as quickly and as soon as possible, and focus on what you're truly great at, especially when you're starting out, because we all have to do stuff to keep the keep the lights on, right? But focus on what you're great at, and those are where you write the processes.
Roy, you mentioned bricks earlier, and this kind of sparked something for me, is that if they have a project business and like they're just working out some new hard tech, right? They do have a process that they should be doing every day and every week, and it's something that you and I have talked about. So you should be having your stand-up meeting, right? You should be having you should be having some kind of lean or agile methodology that you're using, and like those little mini processes that you're going to use to control your development, those can be documented, and that's going to get the reps in, so you understand what process management and holding each other accountable are, and then that will build that culture, right? It'll build a cadence of conversation, and you can spin off all those SOPs for a mature business from like that core culture of like doing things the right way.
Yeah. And again, I wrote SOPs to start because that's the world that I came from. So you don't have to write a crazy SOP. It doesn't have to be a 5-page standard operating procedure work instruction on how something gets done, right? Process can be as simple as the person who's in charge. Let's say, I'll use your example of Agile and Scrum. You say the Scrum Master starts the meeting. They call on the individual people. They ask them what they're doing today. Do they have any roadblocks? And then you save. If they start going on a tangent, you say, okay, hold on. Let's move on to the next person. Let's keep it under 15 minutes. And at the end, we can open up parking lot. You know, then those are the things that you need to work on. But which seems really elementary, right? But if you write out the structure of it, I mapped out and templated out meeting minutes when I first started. I said, here it is. This is your meeting minutes form. When you're taking meeting minutes, use this. Say, okay, what's the actions? These are the actions. What do we have to do? What's the agenda? You know, who are we getting called on? Who said what? Because it organizes your thoughts. And then from there, other processes and other actions can come about.
I mean, that's what we're doing in the other business. We're just, doing that in Confluence and with Jira, making sure that, hey, we have a weekly stand-up. We pull in notes from the last time we had, like the structure of the page is the same each week. Jade says, what is a good line to draw between sticking to the process and figuring out something that needs to change? That's a killer question.
Yeah.
Because there's a, like, we could just fiddle with stuff forever, right, and never get anywhere. It's a great parallel to tech. Is that I deal with inventors and engineers, and like they are super happy to just fiddle with something forever. And I'm like, I'm the product guy. I had to get over that and become this business guy and be like, okay, how do we get to green, right? How do we get outside of the mud and get something to a customer? Because process-wise too, you could just be inside your own head forever and changing it. Like, when do we know like this process isn't working, or that we just have to try it a couple more times?
Like, so there's a few things to touch on there. So first off, I will say that the only constant in life is change. So your processes will change, and that's okay. And hopefully they're changing for the better. And so to know when they're know when they change, and to know when they are changing for the better, is you need to look at your results. And so that's when I get into Agile and I get into Scrum. And so if you're doing those Agile sprints, is what we do. And so we work off 2-week measurable periods. I've heard people work off 3 weeks. I've heard people work off 4 weeks. If you get any longer than that, then I don't recommend it. But we work off 2 weeks periods. And at the end of every 2 weeks, we take a look at what's going on and we say, what went right, what went wrong, and what can we do better? And so that gives the team an opportunity to look at the results. Okay, we in manufacturing, you could say we pushed out 50 units this 2 weeks, and that is more than we've done because we're reporting it, or it's less than we've done. Okay, well, what went wrong? Maybe just a one-off, right? And so you need to follow the trends and follow the reports. I am huge on analytics, so I want to make sure that I'm tracking. So I do use Jira a lot. So I use velocity reports, and I live by velocity reports and say, what did we get accomplished? How much of it did we get accomplished? What was the outlier? And at the end of 2 weeks, you want to take a look at what went right, what went wrong, and then what can I do better? And from there, if you see a trend, a negative trend, then you can take a look at your processes and say, okay, what can we tweak? Right. But you don't want to tweak them too much, to what you're saying, Kelly. You don't want to like be constantly stuck in this ever evolving, we're going to take a look at it constantly. I would look at your processes in the same amount of times that you look at your quarter reports or your year-end reports, and then look, because that'll give you enough time to really look at data and really look at trends. And you won't get too caught up in it, right? But you do need to be reporting on what's getting accomplished, right? What you did right, what you did wrong, and what you can do better.
So
KPIs, yes.
Yeah, KPIs are great for dashboards, and in my opinion, better for mature companies. OKRs, just the results. Like if you're growing, what I like about Agile is like Roy mentioned the 2 weeks. If we have a meeting, Jade, and I say, okay, we've all agreed, and in 2 weeks, this is what our goal is going to be. And then every 2 weeks, I'm like, development is behind, our marketing plan is behind. Like we all agreed that we were going to do that. And if we do it like 3 times in a row, where every single time, like either we're really bad at planning, we have the wrong people, or we have the wrong process. So it's usually it's a people process situation. And so I like the pace of that, but the results prove, you know, because if you're having to stand up and you're saying, okay, Roy, what was holding you up from completing work yesterday? What do you need today? What are you gonna do? And you're like, nothing. I don't need anything. I'm killing it. And then at the end of 2 weeks,
Right.
you're
And
like,
you came and there's nothing there.
hey
Right.
man, you were supposed to like, you said that you love websites and you don't. And you're like, oh, I need to change what my position is. I don't love websites. That was a lie. I like doing this and I'm much better at it. Cool. Okay. Like let's maybe change something about the business. But I like the idea of having processes around just business communication and
Mhm.
using those as tools, because uh, I don't know. People are obsessed with this OKR thing, and in ISO, people want objectives and they want KPIs, and we worry about all that. And I'm like, we write stuff down and we have our management review Q2, and I realize like half the time we just crush right through them, but we have a meeting every day.
Yeah.
So
Those daily meetings are extremely important. That's your
yeah,
real pulse.
yeah,
You can manipulate reports and you can manipulate numbers to look like however you want them to
yeah.
look, but you need to do those daily stand-ups. I'm big on KPIs. And like I said, I'm big on velocity reports. So I want to look at what went out.
Yeah.
What tasks got accomplished from, if I'm pulling a Jira velocity report, I want to see what did we say that we were going to do? And then what did we actually do? And then how does that match up from the previous 2 weeks going back?
So Jade, if your goal for the 2 weeks was to reach out to 100 venture capital firms, right? And I looked at that report, and yeah, I could have a dashboard that says like, here's how many have been accomplished. But we also at the end of the 2 weeks could be like, okay, well, we tried a strategy, right? We tried this strategy that we heard about, or we tried this tactic that we heard about, and it didn't work. So maybe we need to change tactics as well, so we can go all the way down deep. It's like our outreach strategy, or our emailing tactic, or we're using hunter.io to like scrape email addresses and cold email, and we're like, that sounds so cool, but guess what, it's spammy and doesn't work. So maybe we need to shift tactics. So like i i like the freedom to try things, but having that cadence, right? The cadence of communication with the
Mhm.
stand-ups and the so we were talking about Connor. We do a big meeting each week, and then on some primary accounts we have the same kind of meeting outward facing each week, and then internally here at my other company we do a daily stand-up, and then we do a monthly all hands meeting. So like you can do it different ways for different size companies, because obviously one is small and the other one has a lot of people. But you can do it different ways, but the expectation is there, right? Everyone expects to have an update on the business every month, and we can air grievances and talk about safety stuff, talk about what's really important, what we're going to focus on that month. Everyone expects that. But if I didn't have it, then my process would be broken. But I think when you're small and you're just starting, oh, you'll love this. There's a good study on different co-founders and the cultures that they created, and they found that the proximity of their desks increased communications to a level that allowed them to uh, outperform people of comparable class. So as businesses got bigger, and this makes sense, is like when you're on a different floor, you're like on a different planet, right? But the proximity of the entrepreneur to the work was a massive differentiating factor. So the guy that did this study, he studied in the 60s, America's push to go to the moon, right? So he studied Lockheed, he studied Boeing, he studied all of these companies, and he said, okay, both of these people worked on ICBMs, but this company won. And what did all the winning companies look like? And it was because they had higher rates of collaboration and communication, not because they had smarter people. So it, to me, like, we live in this like now Zoom pandemic era, but we also have, we like, Roy, you're like 20 minutes down the street, and also impossible to get to, right?
Right. Yeah.
But we also have the ability to like hop on Zoom anytime we want. So like, that's why I'm so into this daily stand-up thing, is that we've known for 60 years that that's the way to do it.
And in the pandemic era, I would say turn your cameras on.
Yeah.
That's big, right? You got to embrace technology when you're doing stand-ups. So I wrote a whole checklist on 10 things to increase productivity over remote. So that's part of what we do is remote learning. And so always you want to try to increase communication as much as possible, bring people in. That's a big thing right now, is that one-on-one chats are happening more than they would in the office. So if you were in the office, it's not as likely as you would go and have a one-on-one conversation with somebody. Maybe you shut the door behind them, because basically that's what we're doing right now, is when we're having that one-on-one chat, is we're walking into somebody's office and we're shutting the door so nobody else can hear us. And so would that happen in real life? Is this a real conversation, which is a shut the door kind of a conversation? Or is this one that maybe you would have it in an open area so that other team members could hear it? Or would you have it water cooler talk? And so those conversations still need to happen in those similar type of environments in your virtual company. So that's where chat rooms come in. That's where, if you don't have something like Microsoft Teams or something like that, then you should be CCing people, even though I hate email, but that you should not be a one-on-one chat.
Let's see, we've got a question from Carlos. What about when you create a product and it is only you and your partner? When you have something good, but everything you're talking about sounds like Chinese. I hope you can understand my question.
So I think I do understand this question. And I think it's a similar thing that I went through in my business. So when we first started our business, everything did sound like Chinese. So pretty much everybody, because we've been doing cloud remote businesses since 2015, 16. And so cloud and remote learning and Microsoft Teams and Zoom, now it's par for the course. But 6 years ago, people didn't know what it is that we were talking about when we were saying, oh, we're going to build you modern business solutions through automation and remote. They would look at us and say, what are you talking about? Right. And so the way that we went through this, Carlos, hopefully this helps you, is we got our whole team together in a room as much as possible. Back then there was only 4 of us. So if there's only 2 of you, then get together as much as possible and try to explain it to each other as clear and easy as possible. And so cloud computing, I could get extremely technical, but nobody would care. And so that was hurting sales, as we would say, oh, we build remote solutions through automation and we use Microsoft SharePoint and we can build these tools. And people would be like, what? Too complicated. I don't care. Right. And it didn't help us. And so what we did is we broke it down to its simplest form, to the point where it could live in a hashtag. And at that point, it can be consumed by the everyday person and people can understand it. And so we came up with the hashtag work wherever. So they say, what do you do? Work wherever. We help you work wherever. And then people could say, okay, so like working on a beach. Yeah. We ran a campaign, work from beach. We ran, and we had a 1-page website that was just work from beach. We had another one that was skip traffic. We had another one that was don't go to work. And we weren't changing the product. We were just changing the way we explained the project to others. Product, rather, not project. We're changing the way that we explained the product. Now our product is, the way that we say is simplify. Because I could sit here and I could say, oh, we're going to build out and we're going to use artificial intelligence, and we're going to use virtual agents, and we're going to use Power Platform and automate. And we're going to build applications that can do all, but you don't care. You just care that it's as simple as possible. And so that's what we do. We build simple solutions. We simplify your business so that you can focus on other things. It's simple. So I would say, if you are trying to explain your product and you're trying to explain your business right now and it's sounding like Chinese, then I think that you're trying to overcomplicate it. You need to break it down to its simplest form and try to fit it into a hashtag. How are you helping people? So one of my favorite examples for this is Zappos. And so there's a book out there. It's called Delivering Happiness. And this was one of the ways that I was able to finally break through and see how it was. And we were to go through the work wherever hashtags and all the other stuff and simplifying our products was. So Delivering Happiness by Zappos, the guy who created Zappos. And so what he sells was shoes. Right? That's what Zappos started. And if you don't know about Zappos, they actually created Amazon Prime before Prime existed. The whole 2-day shipping was actually created by Zappos, and then Amazon bought Zappos, and then thus Amazon Prime and 2-day shipping was born. And so Zappos, what he did was, instead of saying come buy shoes online, because this was way back in the day when people thought that you had to go to a shoe store and put your shoes on, and why would I buy your shoes online and everything. And so he changed it to, we don't sell shoes, we sell happiness. It's about the feeling that you get when you get a new package at your house. And so he changed his thought process from selling shoes to delivering happiness. And you start to see this with more and more marketing today. You'll see it with Coca-Cola. You'll watch a Coca-Cola commercial, and the whole commercial won't mention Coca-Cola one time. It'll just be like, look, we're sitting here and we're hanging out with our family and we're flipping burgers and we're high-fiving each other. And then at the end, it'll say Coca-Cola. And you'll be like, what does that have to do with Coke? But it doesn't have to do with Coke, because we're not selling sugar water. We're selling an experience around the product. And so if you can break your product, whatever it is, that might sound like Chinese, to break it down to a feeling or break it down to something that you can easily convey into a hashtag.
That's awesome.
Hopefully that's what you meant by that question.
Yeah, and shameless plug, the show that I just recorded yesterday, so End Hype from yesterday, is actually on this exact topic, is communicating technical ideas with clarity, because it's such a common issue that not just internally people have, because a really great startup founding team initially, I like seeing two-person teams, like with a business skill and a technical skill. In my opinion, the perfect team also has an ops person that moderates inside and outside at the same time. But often the business person, they see the vision and they believe in the product, they believe in the customer, but they don't really understand the tech, and that's okay. That's not really their wheelhouse, but it can get contentious unless that tech person can be like Steve Wozniak, right? He's just like really intelligent, but also easy to understand and personable, and communication is such a huge part of success that at a certain point, if you can't internally communicate, it's really, really hard to develop a business. And it's almost impossible to develop a team, because you're going to have an engineering team. And if you can't describe something in an ultra simple, concise way, and I always say, be Ernest Hemingway, right? Never use a few words when, one will suffice. But if you can't describe something clearly, it's going to be really, really hard to grow. Really, really hard. But it'll be impossible to get investors. It'll be possible to sell, but it'll be really hard to build out your team. Everything is contingent on that, and you can practice together, right? That's the great part about not having two super tech founders. you're two of the same, you're like, I tell really smart people that I deal with, I was like, you need a dumber person. That's what you need, and they're like, what do you mean I need a dumb person? I'm like, I'm just trying to get your attention. What you really need is somebody that's smart in a domain that you're not smart in, right? So like when you talk about your smart thing, they're like, I don't understand. That's what you need. You need somebody that's dumber to talk to, and you need to be able to describe your thing in a way that that person will understand. Maybe not like the code or like the actual hard tech, but like what you're trying to achieve, what you said about achieving the benefits. That's like, that's square one. Like you have to be able to discuss benefits and emotions and get people to use their imagination of how it's going to feel. So when we talk about business processes, and I talk to people about things like that, I don't say, yeah, like we're going to hit this tech stack. I'm like, I think it was in my post. It's like we're going to talk about eliminating the drudgery of the business so you can focus on important stuff, on the things that
Right.
really fulfill you and drive you. And I can talk to you like about it like that, and then we can. I'm a big fan of like hiring out. Really, like I
Yeah, me
just be
too.
like, I'm gonna get somebody that already knows this. I'm gonna tell them like, oh, like I need I, this is what I'm doing. Like I don't want to spend a minute figuring this out. Oh, Isaac, how do these ideas, business processes apply to non-IT business ideas? Look, Isaac, I understand where you're coming from, but all businesses are systems and they're systems of processes. So if you think of like a bowl of bubbles, right? So each of those are little processes. We have an interlinked map of all of these things that touch each other. And when we create a business, everything becomes a process. So how you outreach to investors or partners becomes a process, right? How you onboard a team member is a process, right? How you approach a distributor or how you manage an engineering team. So if you're even a technical founder or not it doesn't matter. It's like if you can adopt a project development methodology or project management methodology, like those are processes. And no business is going to have one product, right? You're going to start with one product, rule of one, right? You're going to start with rule of one. And excellent businesses, they get a second product or they improve a product. But like if you can hack it out and create a business process, then it's really not an IT thing. It's how businesses work, right? What do you think?
Anything can be a process.
Yeah, anything can be a process.
Invoicing is a process.
Mm.
Onboarding is a process.
I make this joke about ISO because it's not prescriptive, right? It doesn't tell you what to do. It just says like here are the requirements for documentation. So if I want a process that says every time a customer calls to tell them to get lost and that I hate him, that I could be ISO compliant, right?
Right.
I probably wouldn't achieve my like strategic objectives unless that was to go out of business, but like I could make that my sales process. Everything should be a process because then you can do it the same way. And even if it's just your business is just you, if you do things the same way and they're not working, you can adjust it. But if you're just winging it every single time, like how can you improve? You can't improve when you're like on sand, shifting sand, right? You need some kind of stability.
Yeah. And so I would say that systems scale, right? And
Yeah.
so it doesn't have to, when we think of systems and we think of programs and stuff like that, the first thought is technology. But if your business is not a tech business, it's very possible that you're using technology in some way, or there are steps in whatever it is that you're doing. I used the analogy of baking a cake. That's non-technical, but it's still a recipe to success and how it is that you get to that end of that cake. And so that's how you need to approach your business processes, is that what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? It could be onboarding, like I said. There are steps onboarding is one of the most popular ones that I go in and clean up. It's usually a mess, and usually nobody knows how to do it, and that's likely because you don't do it very often, right? It's not something you're doing every day. And so you have these off the wall, not every onboarding experience is the same. And so that's a very easy one to start with. And so we've templated out with checklists. You say, okay, first the person accepts their offer, right? And then an account is created for them. And then we send them the welcome package, which contains the W-2, W-9 or direct deposit forms or whatever. And then they get a presentation of who we are. And then they have to watch a video. Then they have to do whatever it is. They go down the list, right? And so that is a process. It's not a technical process. It doesn't have necessarily mean that there's automation. It's not built for automation, but there are areas that you can automate around that. You can automate that when they fill out certain forms, who they are, that then after they hit submit, the next 4 documents that they have to fill out come to them. Or we put AI in our onboarding, because how many times are you answering the same 15 questions for a new employee, right?
When does my health insurance start?
Right. What's our health insurance? When's our 401k? What are our holidays? And so we built a bot. You said, oh, that's a great question. Ask Claudette. And then they'd say, hey, Claudette, what's the first training I should take? Boom, sends them a link to the training. What is our 401k? Sends them a link to register for the 401k. What are our holidays? What are our hours? What are our whatever? And so we put technology into a non-technical process. So it doesn't have to be tech. We are talking about tech, and the ideals of what it is that we're talking about with agile methodology and everything like that comes from the tech industry. But I'm extracting it out of tech. Like, I think agile can be put into your everyday use. I think that the thought process of creating epics and stand-ups and bricks and all of that, reverse engineering any goal. You want to buy a house, reverse engineer. What do you need to do? You need a good
I know we're running long, but I would, you have a great strategy for this. So can we get into a little bit of what we do on our local call, like breaking that up and using an agile like strategy to hit some of those personal goals? I think this is really cool, guys. And I might have to cut this out and put it as a separate snippet on the channel, because this is so cool what Roy's come up with. So let's talk about using processes in our everyday life and how we can do this because I think, like, as an entrepreneur, like, balance is kind of a dumb idea, because we're doing something that's never been done, and it's so personal that it is a part of your life, right? So, like, integrating, getting better, Jade says, with kids, 100%, right? We had some kids playing in the background earlier. I'm at the office, so I'm
constantly muting myself right now so that you don't hear my children.
But yeah, like, getting alignment between what you're trying to do over here and over here, it's an illusion that they're separate, right? So I don't want to, I want you to explain it, Roy. This is good.
Yeah. So the thought process is taking the agile methodology out of tech and bringing it into your everyday life, so that you can break down your goals or epics, whatever you want to refer to them as, and you break it down to the smallest point. And so what I always say is, like, if you want to buy a house, right, and you say, I want to buy my dream house. Okay, let's reverse engineer that. What do you have to do to buy a house? You have to have a good credit score. Okay. And what do you have to do to have a good credit score? You got to pay down your credit cards. Okay. And so how do we pay down our credit cards? Well, let's create 2-week actionable items to pay down our credit score, or pay down our credit card so we increase our credit score. So that's lane 1. That's the financials part of it, right? And so that's wealth, right? And then so what I always talk about, what we've developed actually with Callie, is health, wealth, and relationships. And so those are like your 3 major areas of becoming a better self. We often talk about iPhones and technology and upgrading our operating systems, and to say, okay, iOS 11.2 or whatever is out, and in 6 months, I'm going to have to update my phone overnight, and I'll wake up and my phone will be slightly different, right? I have an Android, and so, like, a new app comes out and I have to update it, right? And then it's slightly different than the last. They didn't rewrite the software. They just changed it, just a tweak, just a little bit, right? And so you can do that on a day-to-day basis to say, how can I get 1% better today? What are my 5 mission critical tasks and steps that I can take on a daily basis, you know, to become a better me, to become Roy 2.0 or Roy 3.0 or whatever it is. And then you have those end goals, those end epics in mind. Like I said, buying a house, and you have the avenue, the reverse engineer of how to take it, so that your New Year's resolutions that we talk about, you know, New Year's resolutions die in February. Why is that? Because we make no real actionable plan of how to achieve them. We just say we want to get in shape. And then we go to the gym for a month and a half. And then we say, oh man, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. And we give up. But if you had a real actionable plan behind it and broke it down and reverse engineered it, and you defined what in shape means, you say, okay, well, in shape to me means that I want to be bench pressing this, and I want to run a sub 7-minute mile, right? Then, okay, now we have actionable things that we can measure against. So if I go out and I try to run a 7-minute mile the first week of January, then that goal is going to look really, really far away. But if I go out and I walk, maybe I just walk a mile, and then, okay, I have a 10-minute mile. Oof, man, I got some ways to go. But then you can measure progress, and we can still implement those sprints that we talked about in the tech world, and we can implement them into every day. And you say, you know, this 2 weeks, I did great. And we do it at the daily. I do it at the daily level too, where I write down 5. And at the end of the day, if I get all 5 done, I won the day. And then did I win the week? Then I win the 2 weeks. And so a really easy example with this is financials. You can take your financials. You could do it. We get paid twice a month. So we get paid every 2 weeks, right? And so we can take a look at my financial statement. A new paycheck comes in, and I can look at what I did with my last paycheck. Oh, maybe I spent, you know, $100 on eating out and fast food. So, okay, I can measure that and then take a look at my next balance and say, did I do better? Oh man, I did worse. So what little tweaks and changes can I do to better my say? Maybe I steal that $100 from me and put it into a savings account or something like that when I direct deposit somewhere else so I can't touch it, right? And
you
so
improve the process.
exactly. You improve the process very slightly, and you tweak it as you go, and you do it in your everyday life, but you have to start with those big goals and you reverse engineer to find out what those 5 mission critical tasks are. And those 5 mission critical tasks have the big goal in mind. So you're not just mindlessly working through the day, because I call that the 1 o'clock. My 1 o'clock freak out is, holy crap, what did I get done today? And if I have nothing tangible to look at and to say, oh, oof, okay, well, yeah, I did that and I did that and I did that. Then if I don't have that to look at, then to me, I just did a lot of stress in a day, you know, like I didn't really get anything accomplished. I ran around a lot, put out a bunch of fires, but at the end of the day, did I really have something tangible to look at and say, yes, I got these 5 mission critical things accomplished that I can measure towards my goal.
So that's awesome. So pretty much for any business, like to unpack some of these things, we talk about visualizing success, like using your imagination, creating a goal, and then you even said it, reverse engineer. We reverse engineer our success, and we work from there to where we are today. So where people screw up, processes, goals, their business, they screw things up is that they look at where they are right now, and then they say, this is what I want. And then they try to hammer right through it. And, you know, like I want to create an innovation that will clean our bay, right? I want to clean up the bay, you know, with with a product, and that people just start inventing something. And I'm like, you know, by when, how much, like, you know, what type of pollution, like, let's put some parameters on it. Let's imagine what success would look like. Let's put some parameters on it, and then let's break it down into other steps. Because, you know, we get into like a big modeling approach as well. It's like, well, are there other people that have done something similar to that? Can we borrow a framework where, you know, they already have a tool, a process, a methodology that, you know, maybe it's not perfect for us, but we have nothing right now. So like, let's like layer on some steps. Let's get a recipe, right? And it's kind of intuitive for people to use your cake analogy, right? We don't just start throwing ingredients together, like hammering eggs into a bowl and like getting mad that it's not turning into a cake. But like everybody treats their life like that, like I'm going to get into shape. I'm just going to go to the gym a lot. Like, well, I guarantee that that's not going to help, right? I guarantee, because you don't even know, you haven't even made an agreement to yourself what success is going to look like. So you're going to get disappointed right away. And it's the same thing with working with your business partners. You're like, let's create innovation. Like, and then I'll be like, man, Roy's not working fast enough, or I'm doing all the work. And it's like, well, dude, you don't even know what you're doing, and you haven't have any division of labor or responsibilities or a timeline. Like you have created disappointment. Like you're putting an investment of your own time in resentment and disappointment in your friend, right? So that's what's so awesome about this framework. And if you're like a potential entrepreneur and you want to just get the practice, like look up Agile, and what like Roy is saying, try it with a goal, like a personal goal, and realize that, in my opinion, business is the most personal thing in the world, right? So like we just choose to be the person that we want to be, and some people aren't so fantastic. Other people do amazing things with their businesses. They're projections of who is operating them. But if you can do this for a difficult personal goal, like buying a house, losing 20 pounds, reconnecting with your spouse, something like that, then when you apply that skill that you've built onto developing innovation, acquiring, partners or customers or whatever, it will be like more natural, right? So it's also probably, you can forgive yourself a little bit. Yeah, build the skill. But I really like that. It appeals to my particular nature.
Yeah.
Right?
And I spent a lot of time in the software engine. I'm a software engineer. And so that's taking it out of it and putting it into every day. That was kind of a no-brainer for me. It took me a while, but after I did it, I was like, wait a second, why don't we just do this every day? Like, what?
Yeah, this kind of works.
Yeah. And I have a mind map on my website. If you guys want to download one, you can.
Yeah, cool.
Download that and check it out.
Well, I'm gonna wrap it up, but Roy, thank you so much for joining us. I love having these conversations on Thursday. I think we're gonna pull some more people from our mentor group in and have conversations, because everybody's up to something different and so talented. But before we go, Roy, tell everyone where they can follow you, and what's your favorite or two favorite of your podcast?
Man, my two favorite of my podcast. So, so you can find me at innovarepodcast.com. That's INOVARE. I almost forgot how to spell it for a second.
Yeah.
So it's innovarepodcast.com. There's a contact form there if you wanted to fill that out. You can also download I have a daily planner mind map that goes over everything we're talking about, how you can use agile methodology in your everyday world and your everyday life. So I do have that there. You can download that. I'm really active on Instagram. So I'm Roy G Edwards on Instagram. And then I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn as well. Facebook, I'm a little hidden. So my name's like backwards and inside out. But you can reach out to me on the website, innovarepodcast.com. And if you're there, my two favorite, with Alex Vonderhaar, I did an episode on hacking your mind, and it's all about daily habits. I still really love that episode. That was a few back. And then I did one with my brother, who's also an entrepreneur.
I just caught that one. It was great. There's some brother, some silver, sibling, back and forth rivalry. I work with my brother every day, so I was like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But
my brother and I were a year and a half apart, so we basically grew up twins.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we do have a sibling rivalry. He's also an entrepreneur. He owns a $20 million home remodeling company that is just kicking ass right now. So we definitely have that sibling rivalry. And then the third one would probably be Spike Cohen. I did an interview with Spike Cohen, who is the vice presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party. And so it was not really about politics. I mean, sure, we've talked a little bit about politics, but it was more, he was the vice presidential nominee for the guy's name is escaping me now, but he wore the boot on his head.
Yeah. He's telling everybody to brush their teeth.
Yeah, and you'll get a free pony, and so there was an actual marketing behind that. They did it because they would get clicks and they would get attention of people, and so we talked about that. It was called innovating politics. Thanks, Jade, for dropping my
Vermin Supreme.
Vermin Supreme, yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
I love, like, it's like when the internet like leaks out into real life, and
Yes.
you're just like, this guy's trolling real life, and people are taking him seriously. Fantastic.
Yeah. So that's a really good episode as well. Check those three.
I thought he was a Gwar character forever, and no, he's a presidential candidate.
Right.
Very easy to confuse the two things, though.
Yeah.
So, all right, Roy. Thank you so much. We got to catch up, and
yeah,
I know I still owe you a beer. So, all right, everyone. Thank you so much. And if you're watching this live, thanks. If you're watching it on replay, hit me up. What's the next episode going to be about? What do we need to do to make your business, your world a better place? So, all right. This has been End Hype. I'm out.